the city glimmered beneath a pale winter sun. From the top floor of the Vance Global Tower, New York looked like a living mosaic, cars crawling like ants, skyscrapers slicing through the clouds. Inside, the air was crisp, sterile, expensive, the kind of air that whispered power. At the heart of it all sat a polished mahogany boardroom table, stretching longer than some apartments. Every chair was filled executives, assistants, lawyers, analysts. The walls gleamed with digital screens, showing graphs and projections worth billions. And at the head of that table sat Richard Vance, silver-haired, tailored to perfection. His watch alone could buy a penthouse. He exuded the quiet arrogance of a man used to owning every room he entered. He didn't just speak power, he radiated it. Across from him sat Maya Cole. Her calm presence contrasted the sharp tension of the room. Dressed in a sleek white suit, minimal jewelry, and eyes steady as stone, she looked every bit the self-made mogul she was. Her company, Cole Innovations, had just achieved what every investor had called impossibly, an AI technology capable of cutting global energy costs by nearly a third. This meeting was supposed to be historic, a $3 billion partnership between Cole Innovations and Vance Global Energy, the kind of deal that could redefine both their legacies. But something invisible hung heavy in the air. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, scanning the room with a lazy smile. "Impressive work, Ms. Cole," he began, his tone polite but detached. "You've built quite the operation." There was a pause before the word operation, like he'd stopped himself from saying something less polite. Maya smiled faintly. "We prefer to call it an empire." Mr. Vance's laughter rippled softly around the table, but not from everyone. Some of Richard's executives exchanged looks, the kind that said, "Did she just say that?" Richard's smirk tightened. "Empire? That's ambitious." He tapped his pen on the table, eyes narrowing. "Tell me, how does it feel being the only founder of your kind in this space?" The words were light, but the meaning was heavy. Everyone in the room understood exactly what he meant. Maya didn't blink. "It feels like history waiting to happen." For a moment, silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. Richard studied her, searching for a crack, some flicker of insecurity. But she offered none. "Let's talk numbers," she continued, sliding a digital pad across the table. "Projected savings for Titan Energy subsidiaries alone could exceed $800 million in the first quarter." Her voice was steady, practiced. Every stat, every figure, her team had rehearsed for weeks. But as she spoke, Richard wasn't listening. He was watching her. His pen tapped, his jaw tightened. Then, with a low chuckle, he leaned forward and said it. "I'll be honest, Maya, I don't do business with people like you." The words sliced through the air like glass. The assistant at the far end of the room froze mid. One of the lawyers looked up, eyes wide. The hum of the air conditioning suddenly felt deafening. For a heartbeat. No one moved. Then Maya looked up from her tablet, meeting his gaze squarely. Her expression didn't change. Not anger, not shock, just quiet, measured stillness. "People like me," she repeated softly. Richard gave a careless shrug. "You know what I mean? Independent founders. New money. No backing from the right circles. It's not personal. It's business." But everyone knew it was personal. Behind Maya, one of her team members clenched his fists. Another whispered her name under their breath. Maya's fingers hovered over her tablet screen. Then she slowly closed it. The sound echoed louder than it should have. She rose to her feet, graceful, unhurried. Every pair of eyes followed her. "I see," she said finally. Her tone was calm, but her voice carried something powerful, something final. "Then, Mr. Vance, you won't do business at all." Richard blinked, confused for half a second. "Excuse me." She smiled faintly. "This deal, this empire, you think you can buy into it, doesn't need your approval, or your money. We came here to build bridges, not to beg for them." A hush fell over the table. Maya gathered her folder, nodded politely to her team, and turned toward the door. The sound of her heels striking the marble floor felt like thunder. "Ms. Cole," Richard started, his tone shifting from arrogance to disbelief. But she didn't stop. At the doorway, she paused and looked back, not at him, but at the city skyline beyond the glass. "You know," she said quietly, "every time someone like you closes a door, it just reminds people like me that we can build our own." And then she left. For several seconds, no one spoke. The billionaire sat there, his smirk gone, his empire suddenly feeling smaller. One of his executives broke the silence. "Sir, should I schedule a follow-up?" Richard didn't answer. He was still staring at the empty doorway. Outside, Maya walked down the corridor, her team trailing behind her, stunned but silent. When the elevator doors slid open, she exhaled deeply for the first time. Her assistant turned to her, voice trembling. "Maya, are we really walking away from $3 billion? She looked at him, calm and unshaken. "No," she said, "we're walking toward something better." As the elevator descended, the city lights shimmered below each one, a reminder that power doesn't come from money or approval. It comes from knowing your worth. The doors opened to the lobby, cameras flashing as news crews gathered for post-meeting interviews. But Maya didn't stop for them. She walked straight through the noise, head high, eyes forward, because she knew this wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. And far above, in that glass tower, Richard Vance had no idea the decision he'd just made would cost him far more than $3 billion. The elevator doors had barely closed behind Maya Cole when the past began to echo. Those cold words, people like you, weren't new to her. She had heard versions of them all her life. The story of that silence began long before the skyscrapers and boardrooms. It began on the south side of Atlanta, in a neighborhood where opportunity rarely knocked. The streets buzzed with sirens and laughter, hope and hardship. Side by side, in a small one-bedroom apartment above a grocery store, a young girl named Maya sat by the window, tinkering with a broken radio. Her mother, Evelyn Cole, watched from the kitchen, her voice warm but weary. "Maya, you've been at that thing for hours." The little girl grinned, eyes lit with determination. "I think I can fix it, Mama. It just needs to hear better." Evelyn chuckled softly. "Hear better, huh? You're talking about a radio, not a person?" But Maya looked up, serious. "People need to hear better too." Her mother paused, the smile fading into something thoughtful. "You're right, baby. They sure do." Outside, the world was tough. Rent was late more than it wasn't. Evelyn worked double shifts at a hospital, often coming home with tired eyes and sore feet. Yet, every night before bed, she made sure to whisper the same words to her daughter, words that would one day build an empire. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't build. Maya, you hear me? If there's no door, you make one." Maya didn't just hear those words. She lived them. By the time she was 16, her teachers had stopped being surprised by her grades and started being intimidated by her questions. She wasn't just curious, she was relentless. While others saw broken machines, she saw patterns waiting to be solved. But brilliance, in her world, didn't always earn applause. When Maya won a state tech competition, a judge whispered, "I didn't even know they had schools with programs like this." That word, they stuck with her. It burned quietly in her memory, becoming both a scar and a source of strength. College was another battlefield. She got into MIT on a full scholarship. Walking into lecture halls, where she was often the only black woman in the room, professors spoke to her, not with her. Group projects turned into solo battles. She'd watch others get credit for her ideas, then smile, take notes, and keep building. One night, while working on a prototype for a renewable energy model, her roommate asked, "Why do you keep pushing yourself so hard, Maya? You've already proven you're smart." Maya's answer was quiet but sharp, "Because proving I'm smart isn't enough. I need to prove I belong." And so she did. After graduation, Maya stepped into the tech industry, a place where innovation was celebrated, but inclusion, WASN, single quotes T. Her first job interview was a lesson in both humility and resolve. The recruiter smiled too much, talked too fast. "Your resume is impressive, Ms. Cole, but this position requires experience leading teams in major firms. You might not be the right fit just yet." She'd already led research teams in 2 national projects. Another company told her she was overqualified. A third simply never called back. But she didn't stop. Maya began freelancing, consulting, saving every dollar she could. Nights turned into mornings. As she worked from her kitchen table, blue spread beside half-empty coffee cups. That's when the idea was born. An algorithm that could monitor and optimize energy systems in real time, reducing waste, cutting emissions, saving billions. She called it Eve, after her mother. Eve started as a dream. It became her obsession. She coded through exhaustion, failure, and fear. Investors laughed at her pitch decks. One said, "Energy tech, you sure you don't want to start a beauty app? That's where women like you do great." She didn't respond. She just built. And when the first prototype worked, when Eve predicted a 27% drop in energy loss, she knew she had something world-changing. That same night, she called her mother. "Mama," she said breathlessly, "it worked. It actually worked." Evelyn's voice cracked with pride. "Baby, I knew it would. You were born to fix things." Years passed, and Cole Innovations was no longer a dream scribbled on napkins. It was a company, small at first, then unstoppable. She built her team carefully, brilliant minds who believed in purpose over profit. They worked in a repurposed warehouse with peeling paint and buzzing lights. But the energy inside was electric. Word began to spread. Her AI-driven sustainability system caught the attention of universities, governments, and eventually, billion-dollar corporations. But with success came new storms. Competitors tried to undercut her. Some investors offered funding, but only if she handed over control. She refused. Again and again. "If I sell what I built, then I sell the reason I built it," she told her board one night. Her mother's health began to decline soon after. Evelyn would sit on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the sun dip behind the buildings Maya once dreamed of escaping. "You've come so far, baby," she whispered one evening, her voice frail. "But don't let them make you hard. Your strength isn't in fighting, it's in knowing when to walk away." Those words would one day guide her out of that boardroom. When Evelyn passed, Maya didn't cry at the funeral. Not because she wasn't grieving, but because she had promised her mother something. She would finish what she started. The months that followed were brutal. Investors questioned her leadership. Rivals tried to poach her staff. But Maya kept showing up. Every morning, every meeting, every setback. Until one day, Coal Innovations made headlines. Black female CEO launches AI energy platform set to transform the industry. The article went viral. Journalists wanted interviews. Billionaires wanted meetings. Among them, Richard Vance. When his assistant first reached out, offering a partnership worth billions, Maya hesitated. Not because she doubted the opportunity, but because she remembered her mother's words. Be careful who you let sit at your table. Maya, some don't come to eat, they come to own the table. Still, she agreed to the meeting. Not for the money, but for the message, because deep down, she knew every deal she made was bigger than her. It was proof that the world she came from could rise, could lead, could own. So when Richard Vance leaned back in that glass tower and said, "I don't do business with people like you," Maya didn't hear insult. She heard history. She heard every rejection, every sleepless night, every whispered doubt. And she remembered what her mother told her. If there's no door, you make one. That's why she stood up and walked out. Because that silence, the one that filled the boardroom, wasn't weakness. It was legacy. The first pitch meeting was supposed to be her breakthrough. A room filled with venture capitalists, sharp suits, and sharper smiles. Maya stood at the front, slides glowing behind her, explaining how her AI could revolutionize energy efficiency. When she finished, silence followed. One investor finally leaned back, arms crossed. "It's impressive. But let's be honest, Ms. Cole, you're asking for $10 million. You have no corporate backing, no big-name partners, and no track record." She smiled, steady and calm. "That's why it's called a first round." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Come back when someone else believes in you." That was rejection number one. It wouldn't be the last. In the months that followed, Maya pitched to 47 investors. 45 said no. 2 said maybe and never called back. Every no chipped at her pride, but it didn't touch her purpose. Late at night, she'd sit in her small office, the hum of servers filling the silence, writing new proposals, adjusting slides, analyzing every flaw they pointed out. She didn't let rejection break her. She studied it, because every insult was data. Every closed door was feedback. Still, the world didn't make it easy. One investor told her, smiling too wide, "You're a little too passionate. Investors prefer .com." Another said, "You should bring a male co-founder. It'll make people take you more seriously." And one particularly smug executive leaned forward and asked, "Wouldn't you rather sell the patent? Running a company is a lot for someone like you." Someone like you. Those words followed her everywhere. But Maya had learned something vital. She didn't need to fit into their system. She just needed to outlast it. So she built her team brick by brick, believer by believer. The first was Lena Ortiz, a software engineer who had been laid off from a big firm for not being a culture fit. Maya saw brilliance in her code, precision in her logic, and loyalty in her eyes. "You've got talent," Maya told her. "You just need a place where it's not punished." Then came Theo Brooks, a data scientist from Detroit who'd grown up hacking school servers just to fix them. He joined after reading an article about Maya's startup. She said no to $3 billion. He'd later joke, "I figured she could handle a few more no's before the world catches up." Together, they worked in a tiny co-working space that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. They didn't have glass offices or corporate perks, just faith, code, and exhaustion. Money was tight. Investors wouldn't fund them. Banks wouldn't loan them. And the bills kept piling up. One night, Lena looked up from her laptop. "Maya, we're down to our last payroll cycle." Maya rubbed her temples. "Then we make it count. If this next prototype doesn't impress, I'll find another way." And she meant it. She'd sell her car, take out loans, do whatever it took. But then something happened. Their software, the AI named EVE, caught the attention of a small European firm testing green energy grids. They offered a modest contract, not billions, not even millions, but enough to keep them alive. When EVE successfully optimized the system, cutting power waste by 30%, the report went viral across the sustainability community. Overnight, Coal Innovations went from that scrappy startup to the one to watch. Emails flooded in. Partnerships, collaboration requests, invitations to conferences. But Maya remembered every face that had told her no, and she made a decision. She wouldn't chase validation. She'd choose collaboration. Her team grew, but her values stayed firm. In team meetings, she repeated a mantra that became the heart of her company. "We don't climb over people. We climb together. Because the higher we go, the more ladders we build for others." And slowly, the industry began to take notice. At one event, a journalist approached her after her keynote speech. "You've become something of a legend in the tech scene," he said. "The woman who built an empire without a ladder." Maya laughed softly. "No ladder," she replied, "just a lot of wahs and a hammer." But behind that humor was exhaustion. The higher she climbed, the more the world tested her. Emails questioning her leadership. Board members suggesting she step aside for a more experienced CEO. Reporters twisting her success into novelty. Black woman defies odds in tech. It wasn't defiance. It was determination. And every time someone underestimated her, she smiled. Because she'd learned something powerful, the best revenge wasn't anger. It was excellence. Then came the turning point. A global energy firm reached out, proposing a partnership that could finally scale her vision worldwide. The name was familiar. Titan Energy. Their CEO, Richard Vance. At the time, Maya didn't know much about him. All she saw was an opportunity to expand her mission. But fate had already drawn the lines. As she prepared for the first meeting, Lena looked up from her desk. Maya, do you ever stop to realize how far you've come? Maya smiled faintly. No time to look down, Lena. The climb doesn't end just because we reached the clouds. Outside her window, the skyline shimmered towers of glass and steel, reaching higher every year, and somewhere in that skyline stood a boardroom waiting for her. The same boardroom where history would unfold. Let's not celebrate just yet, she murmured. Deals like this come with a price. Her words hung in the air, soft but unsettling. No one understood what she meant, not yet. Days later, Maya stepped off a private jet into the humid air of New York City. The skyline loomed ahead, cold and magnificent, like a chessboard waiting for its next move. Her assistant walked beside her, scrolling through the meeting agenda. Titan's board will be there. Media might get a leak. If this goes through, it's not just a partnership, it's a merger. $3 billion in shared valuation. Maya adjusted her blazer and exhaled slowly. Then we'd better make sure they know exactly who they're dealing with. The next morning, the elevator doors opened into a world of marble, glass, and power. Titan Energy's headquarters towered above Manhattan, a monument to wealth and dominance. Maya's heels clicked against the floor as she entered the lobby. Heads turned. Conversations paused. A black woman in a tailored white suit, flanked by her team, walking into a boardroom built by old money and older prejudice. But Maya didn't notice the stares. She'd seen them before, in venture capital offices, investor lounges, and tech conferences where she'd been mistaken for an assistant, APR rep, or worse. This time, she was walking in as the potential owner of the technology Titan Energy needed to survive. Inside the conference room, Richard Vance extended his hand with a rehearsed smile. His presence filled the space like a storm front. Polished, charming, dangerous. Maya Cole, he said, I've heard quite a lot about you. She shook his hand firmly. And I've heard a lot about you, Mr. Vance. He smirked. Then I suppose we both know this partnership could change everything. The meeting began. Slides flicked across the giant display. Energy savings, carbon offset data, AI infrastructure models. Titan's executives nodded approvingly as Maya explained how her system analyzed global power grids in real time, identifying inefficiencies within seconds. One executive whispered, "She's brilliant." Another murmured, "If this works, it'll revolutionize our entire model." Richard leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You're proposing we integrate Cole into Titan's global systems. That would give your company enormous control and leverage." Maya met his gaze without hesitation. "Control isn't the goal, Mr. Vance. Efficiency is. This isn't about who wins, it's about what the planet loses if we don't act now." Her confidence filled the room. For a brief moment, even Vance seemed impressed. As the hours passed, negotiations grew intense. Legal teams compared clauses. Finance experts whispered numbers. And the weight of billions hovered between every sentence. Finally, Vance leaned back, his expression unreadable. "You know," he said, almost casually, "I've worked with innovators from every corner of the world. But I have to admit, your rise has been impressive. Unusual." Even Maya tilted her head slightly. "Unusual." He smiled thinly. "Let's just say, not many people from your background make it this far in my world." The room went silent. The comment hung like smoke, subtle, poisonous, impossible to ignore. Raphael's eyes darted toward Maya, waiting for her reaction. But she didn't speak. "Not yet," Vance continued, unaware, or uncaring, of the line he'd just crossed. "Still," he said, "if this partnership works, you'll finally have a seat at the table. A real one." Maya smiled, small, sharp, unshaken. "I don't need a seat at anyone's table, Mr. Vance. I build my own." The words hit like thunder. For the first time, Vance blinked, his mask slipping, if only for a second. When the meeting ended, Vance's team gathered their notes, still buzzing about the possibilities. $3 billion, one whispered. "This will redefine everything." But Maya stood apart from them, gazing through the floor-to-ceiling window at the skyline below. Her reflection stared back, calm, composed, and calculating. Behind that quiet exterior, something had shifted. She'd spent her life proving herself to people who doubted her. But now, she realized something else. Some tables aren't worth sitting at, no matter how much money they offer. That night, as her private car drove through the city lights, her assistant turned from the front seat. "So, do you think they'll sign?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window, watching the skyscrapers blur into streaks of gold and gray. "I think," she said finally, "we'll find out who they really are soon enough. And as the car disappeared into the Manhattan night, the world's most promising deal in green technology stood on the edge of history and betrayal. The morning sun glared off the glass facade of Vance Tower, a monolith of power piercing the New York skyline. For most people, stepping inside this building meant entering a world ruled by old money, quiet deals, and invisible lines drawn long ago. But for Maya Cole, this was just another room to conquer. Her reflection glided across the marble floor as the revolving doors spun behind her. She was dressed in an ivory suit, sharp, precise, and commanding. Her team followed in perfect formation, carrying tablets and confidence. The receptionist glanced up, eyes flicking briefly from Maya to the badge in her hand. Name, she asked, tone polite but distant. Maya Cole. Maya said, Cole Innovations. We have an appointment with Mr. Vance. For a moment, the woman hesitated, as if double-checking whether she'd heard correctly. Then, forcing a smile, she tapped the screen. Of course, the executive elevator will take you straight up. Good luck. Maya didn't need luck. She needed respect. As the elevator rose, the city fell away beneath them. Maya's team whispered final notes about the presentation, the data points, the graphs, the projections, worth billions. But Maya stood silent, eyes fixed on the ascending numbers. Are you nervous? Raphael asked, breaking the tension. Maya smiled faintly. No, I've already been where nerves could destroy me. This is just another room. The elevator chimed, the doors opened, and there it was. The room. The Titan Energy boardroom looked more like a museum of success. Massive windows framed the skyline like a crown. The table, long and glossy, reflected the faces of the 12 most powerful people in the company. And at the far end sat Richard Vance, billionaire, visionary, and master of the corporate chess. He rose when Maya entered, his tailored suit catching the morning light. Ms. Cole, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It's an honor to finally meet the mind behind Cole. The honors, mutual, Maya replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, practiced, the kind that said I win most games I played at. As they took their seats, Maya noticed it, the subtle looks. The man on her left, pretending to check his notes but smirking when she spoke. The woman across the table, whispering something under her breath and stifling a laugh. The faintest rolling of eyes whenever Maya's team emphasized the word innovation. They didn't say anything aloud. They didn't have to. Prejudice, she'd learned, rarely announced itself. It simply smiled and waited for you to fail. But Maya had built an empire on the very things people thought she couldn't do. And she wasn't about to shrink now. Let's begin, she said, connecting her tablet to the projector. The lights dimmed. The screen came alive with moving visuals, smart grids, data flows, and green cities powered by her software. Her voice was calm, measured, magnetic. Cole doesn't just analyze energy systems. It predicts waste before it happens. It learns from itself, improving daily efficiency across entire regions. She gestured to the numbers glowing behind her. 30% cost reduction. Within the first year, a low murmur rippled through the room. Even Vance leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly. Impressive, he said. Very impressive. Tell me, how'd you manage to develop a system that advanced without corporate backing? Maya smiled. We didn't need corporate backing. We had vision and people who believed in it. Vance chuckled softly. I liked that answer. But as the presentation continued, his expression began to shift. Something in her confidence unsettled him. He wasn't used to being led in a meeting, especially not by someone who refused to play by his unspoken rules. When the final slide faded, the room was silent. Then, applause, cautious at first, then genuine. Even the skeptics nodded. Vance stood and walked toward her. Remarkable work, Ms. Cole. Titan Energy could use technology like this. With a partnership, we could revolutionize global sustainability. Maya clasped her hands calmly. I agree, but this wouldn't just be a partnership. It would be a merger of equals. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Vance tilted his head, amused. Equals, you say? Yes, Maya replied. Cole Innovations owns its full intellectual property, 100%. No shareholders, no external investors, just us. The smile faded from his face. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. You own all of it, Vance asked slowly. I do. His tone changed, subtle at first. That's unusual. Most founders at your level don't hold that kind of control. I'm not most founders, Maya said. Vance exhaled, forcing a laugh. You're confident, I'll give you that. But I can't imagine the workload. Running a company without board guidance, without structure. Her gaze sharpened. We built our own structure, one that doesn't need permission to innovate. The conversation turned colder. Questions about algorithms turned into questions about scalability. Compliments about her strategy turned into doubts about long-term governance. It was no longer admiration. It was interrogation. The same executives who had been smiling minutes earlier now wore polite smirks, the kind that said, you've had your moment. Know your place. Vance crossed his arms. You see, Ms. Cole, business at this scale requires experience, guidance. Perhaps if you had the right advisors, we could consider full integration. Maya leaned back in her chair. Or perhaps you're uncomfortable with a woman, a black woman who doesn't need your guidance. The room froze. No one breathed. Vance's jaw tightened. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Her voice was calm, controlled, the kind of composure born from years of walking through rooms. Just like this one, rooms that thought her. Success was a mistake waiting to be corrected. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the projector dot. Then Vance smiled again, but this time, it was the smile of a man who decided he'd already won. Well, he said, we'll have our legal team review the terms. But let's be realistic. Ms. Cole, deals like this are delicate. People in my world tend to work with those they understand. Those, like them, he paused, almost daring her to react. And Maya just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then maybe it's time your world learned to understand someone new. As she and her team left the boardroom, the silence was heavy. Her assistant whispered, he's not used to hearing that kind of truth. Maya didn't respond. She pressed the elevator button and stared at the closing doors. Her reflection stared back, poised, strong, unshaken. But deep in her chest, something was beginning to stir. A realization, a decision, a quiet storm. The deal might still be alive, but so was her resolve, because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is smile in the face of prejudice, and plan their next move in silence. The room was too quiet to still. It was the kind of silence that comes right before an earthquake, when everyone knows something's about to break. Maya Cole sat across from billionaire Richard Vance, the man whose company could turn her life's work into a global force for change. Her software could save billions in wasted energy, reshape entire industries, even heal a planet that was burning. But now, all of that hung in the balance. Because of one man's pride, the meeting had started tense, but civil. Richard's board members sat around the massive glass table, murmuring over financial projections and merger clauses. Maya answered every question, flawlessly poised, articulate, untouchable. She was used to skepticism, used to being underestimated. But this felt different. This wasn't doubt. It was something older, something colder. Richard leaned back in his chair, his silver cufflinks catching the light. His expression had changed, no longer interested, no longer hiding his disdain. So, he said slowly, voice dripping with a mocking politeness, you're telling me that this entire operation, this billion-dollar enterprise is owned and led by you? Maya nodded. That's correct, he smirked. No major investors, no partners with real influence. Just us, Maya said. We built it from the ground up. He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. That's ambitious. Maya felt her stomach tighten. She'd heard that word before. Ambitious, the corporate code for you don't belong here. The air shifted. Richard stood, walked slowly toward the window overlooking Manhattan, and stared out as if pondering something too important to say aloud. Then, without turning, he muttered the words that would shatter the room. I don't do business with people like you. The sentence landed like a gunshot. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the hum of the city below seemed to fade. Maya blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. Excuse me. Richard finally turned, his tone as casual as if he were discussing whether you're talented, Ms. Cole. No one's denying that. But people like you, he gestured vaguely with his hand, tend to complicate things. Investors get nervous. The media twists narratives. It's not personal, it's just business. Just business. The words echoed like poison. Across the table, her team looked frozen, shocked, angry, but Mayashi was calm, still, centered in a silence that spoke louder than fury ever could. For a moment, she said nothing. She simply closed her folder, carefully, deliberately. The soft click of the clasp sounded louder than anything else in that vast boardroom. Then she stood. I followed her. She looked directly at Richard, her gaze unwavering, her voice even. You're right, Mr. Vance. It's not personal. It's principled. He raised an eyebrow, meaning. Maya's tone didn't change, meaning you won't be doing business at all. And with that, she gathered her tablet, nodded to her stunned team, and began walking toward the door. Wait, one of the executives stammered. Ms. Cole, surely we can discuss. But she didn't stop. Her heels clicked across the polished floor. Each step measured, echoing like a countdown to the end of the deal. Richard's voice rose behind her. You're throwing away $3 billion. She paused at the doorway, then turned slightly, just enough for her words to carry. No, I'm walking away from small minds that think $3 billion can buy dignity. For a heartbeat, the room was still. Then she was gone. Outside, the world felt louder, the rush of traffic, the flash of sunlight, the pulse of the city below. Maya's team followed in silence, too stunned to speak. Lena finally broke the stillness. Did he really just? Yes, Maya said quietly. Theo clenched his fists. Maya, that was $3 billion. Years of work. She turned to face them, her expression calm but fierce. And it would have cost us everything we built this company to stand for. Her words cut through the air like steel. They'd all worked too hard to trade their integrity for validation. From a man like Richard Vance. Maya looked up at the towering glass building behind her. It gleamed like a symbol of everything wrong with the system, beautiful on the outside, corroded at its core. Then she whispered, almost to herself, they think they can define our worth. But worth doesn't come from their approval. It comes from our courage to walk away. Back upstairs, Richard Vance watched from the window as Maya stepped into her car. His jaw tightened, the smirk gone. Unbelievable, he muttered. She'll regret this. But deep down, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. Because for the first time in years, someone hadn't begged to be part of his empire. Someone had told him no. And that unsettled him more than he'd ever admit. As the elevator doors closed behind Maya and her team, Lena whispered, "So what now?" Maya exhaled slowly, eyes sharp with quiet determination. "Now," she said, "we build something so powerful, they'll wish they'd treated us differently." The doors slid shut. The city roared outside. And somewhere in that noise, a storm was forming, one that would make the world remember her name. The world didn't hear the sound of Maya closing that folder, but by morning, everyone felt its echo. It began as a whisper, an anonymous post on a finance blog. Titan Energy's $3 billion merger with GreenPath Technologies abruptly canceled. Sources suggest internal conflict. Within hours, that whisper turned into thunder. Headlines flashed across every business network. Historic deal collapses. Tension at the top. The billion-dollar question. What really happened between Vance and Brooks? Maya sat in her quiet office, the blinds half-drawn, sunlight cutting through the still air like divided truth. Her team huddled around their phones, stunned by how fast the story had exploded. "Should we release a statement?" her assistant asked, voice trembling. Maya didn't look up. She just shook her head. "No, let silence speak for us." Her calm unnerved them, but there was strength in her silence, an unspoken understanding that the truth doesn't always need a microphone. Across town, Richard Vance was in full crisis mode. Titan Tower buzzed with panic. PR teams scrambled, lawyers huddled, and his communications director barked into phones. Richard paced his office. Tie loosened, eyes burning with disbelief. "How the hell did this leak?" he demanded. "We control every narrative that leaves this building." "Sir," one of his executives said carefully, "people are asking questions. Some are suggesting what?" Richard snapped. That maybe the issue wasn't business, but personal. The room froze. Richard's jaw tightened. "Then tell them it was creative differences. Say the merger didn't align with our long-term goals. I don't care what you make up, just fix it." But lies spread differently in the age of social media. By the end of the week, his version of the story was already being drowned by a growing wave of speculation. A single tweet from an anonymous insider sent everything spinning. "I was in the room." She handled it with grace. "He didn't." It went viral within hours. Millions liked, shared, and dissected it. Clips of Maya walking out of Titan Tower, captured by security cameras and leaked online, turned into a symbol. No words. No confrontation. Just quiet dignity. Comment sections lit up. She walked away from $3 billion. That's power. She's not just a CEO, she's a statement. This is what self-respect looks like. Meanwhile, talk shows debated her every move. Was it a misunderstanding? Was it discrimination? Or was it courage refusing to be belittled even in the face of billions? And through it all, Maya remained silent. No interviews. No press conferences. No retaliation. She focused on her work. She met with her engineers, visited her team, and continued developing the next version of her energy software. The storm outside only made her focus sharper. But even in silence, her message was deafening. Days turned to weeks, and the narrative shifted. People stopped calling it the failed merger and started calling it the stand. Investors who once doubted her began to call again, out of pity, but out of respect. GreenPath's valuation quietly doubled. Venture firms wanted in. Journalists wanted quotes. Universities wanted her to speak, yet she turned them all down. When her CFO, Derek, brought her another stack of interview requests, Maya smiled faintly. "Let them talk," she said. "The truth always finds its way through the noise." On the other side of the storm, Titan Energy wasn't doing so well. Their stock had dropped 12%. Rumors of internal lawsuits surfaced on behind Richard's perfectly curated public image. Cracks were beginning to show. At one late-night board meeting, one of his oldest partners finally said what everyone else was thinking. "Richard, whatever happened with Maya Brooks, it's not going away. You can't spin character." He didn't answer. He just stared out the window at the city skyline, his empire shining, but flickering. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew. The real loss wasn't the $3 billion deal, it was his reputation. His legacy. And worse, his reflection in the mirror. Back in Maya's world, things were different. Quiet, but powerful. Her silence had become a movement. Young entrepreneurs began sharing her photo online with captions like, "Know your worth." Editorials called her the woman who walked away. She didn't plan it. She didn't orchestrate it. But she represented something far greater than a business deal. She represented choice. A choice to walk away when respect is no longer on the table. And as the digital storm began to fade, Maya finally stepped out of her office one evening. Taking in the sunset over the city skyline, her assistant asked softly, Do you think it's over? Maya smiled. Storms don't destroy everything, she said. Sometimes, they clear the sky. She looked ahead, her mind already on what came next, not revenge, not fame, but purpose. Because for Maya Brooks, silence wasn't the end of her story. It was the calm before something far greater, and that was only the beginning. The storm that once surrounded Maya had now turned damning straight at Richard Vance. It began with a sound, a single, grainy audio clip only, 15 seconds long. Richard's voice, unmistakable, cutting through the static. I don't do business with people like you. The words hung like poison in the air. By the next morning, the world had heard them. Social feeds erupted. Hashtags trended globally. People like you, Maya Brooks, integrity over billions Titan. Energy's official pages flooded with outrage. Employees posted anonymous confessions. Partners quietly backed away, and within hours, stock prices began to nosedive. A CNBC host summarized it bluntly. Titan's not just facing a PR nightmare, it's facing an identity collapse. Inside his glass tower, Richard stood alone, staring at his reflection in the window. The man who once controlled markets with a single call couldn't control his own narrative now. Legal on the phone, he muttered, but no one answered. The very walls that once echoed his authority now echoed his isolation. His assistant gone. His communications chief resigned. Investors silent. And as he scrolled through his phone, headline after headline carved his downfall in real time. Titan CEO exposed and leaked audio. $3 billion deal collapse sparks industry reckoning. Power meets consequence. For Richard, every click felt heavier than the last. Across town, Maya's office looked nothing like his. There was no chaos, only quiet focus. She sat at her desk, a soft light on her face as she scrolled through messages. Thousands of them, emails, comments, letters. A young woman from Kenya wrote, "Because of you, I pitched my idea today. They said I wasn't ready, but I didn't walk away this time." A teenage boy from Atlanta wrote, "My mom showed me your video. She said you reminded her that dignity pays better than money." Each message carried a heartbeat, a story of its own. Maya blinked back tears as she read. For the first time since walking out of that boardroom, she felt the true weight of her decision. This was bigger than her company, bigger than Titan Energy. It was about the system, the unspoken hierarchies, the silent exclusions, the boardroom biases that had gone unchecked for too long. Her assistant entered quietly, holding a stack of invitations. CNN, BBC, Forbes, they all want interviews. The UN wants you to speak at their Global Innovation Summit. Maya smiled faintly. Not yet, she said. Her voice was soft, but certain. Right now, I just want to build. Outside, reporters still swarmed the entrance of her building, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. But inside, Maya focused on what she always had: the mission. Her engineers worked late into the night. New partners reached out, companies led by women, minorities, and innovators who believed in collaboration, not control. And as GreenPath Technologies grew, something extraordinary happened. Her quiet refusal had sparked a global conversation about ethics and leadership. Meanwhile, Richard faced a reckoning. Titan Energy's board released a statement, effective immediately. Richard Vance has stepped down as CEO. The footage of him leaving the building, flanked by security, no tie, no entourage, circulated within minutes. It was the image of a man who had lost not just a company, but the illusion of untouchable power. Back in her office, Maya watched the clip once, then closed her laptop. She felt no satisfaction, no revenge, just a quiet sadness for a world that still needed to learn so much. Her CFO, Derek, entered the room with a hesitant smile. You did it, Maya. You took down one of the most powerful men in business. She looked out the window at the city skyline, lights glittering like new possibilities. No, she said. He took himself down. I just chose not to follow. The line lingered, soft, truthful. Final. Later that evening, she stepped out onto her balcony, wind brushing against her face. From below, someone called her name, Maya Brooks. You changed everything. She smiled, not out of pride, but gratitude, because she now understood. This wasn't about a battle, lost or won. It was an awakening for those who had been told they didn't belong, for those who had been underestimated, dismissed, or overlooked. Her walkout had become a spark, and now the world was watching what would burn and what would rise from the ashes. As dawn broke the next morning, Maya stood in her office again, ready for another day, another challenge, another chapter. Her assistant entered with a fresh stack of proposals. Lots of people want to work with us now, she said. Maya smiled. Good, she replied. Let's make sure they're the right people. She turned back to the skyline, sunlight spilling across her desk. The city was waking up. And so was the world. Because in the aftermath of one man's arrogance, something far more powerful had emerged. A movement built, not on wealth, but on worth. And Maya Brooks, she wasn't just leading a company anymore, she was leading a revolution of respect. The world now knew her name. Maya Brooks. The woman who walked away from a $3 billion deal and walked straight into history. Her image filled headlines, business covers, and late-night talk shows. But while the media debated her motives, Maya remained silent, focused, and strategic. Inside her glass-walled office, overlooking the city, she studied a digital dashboard glowing with new inquiries, hundreds of partnership requests, investment offers, and invitations to global summits. Her assistant, Lena, stepped in with a stunned expression. "You might want to see this one." She handed over a sleek, white envelope embossed with a familiar logo. It was from Tesla Energy. Inside, a personal letter. "Ms. Brooks, your vision aligns perfectly with our next-generation sustainability initiative. Let's talk collaboration. E. Musk." Maya exhaled softly, then smiled. "First Tesla, then who?" Lena scrolled through her tablet. "IBM, Siemens, even the UN's Green Tech division. Everyone wants to partner." The irony wasn't lost on Maya. A few months ago, she'd been fighting for funding, her name buried beneath layers of corporate bias. Now, those same boardrooms were calling her. But Maya didn't rush. She took every call, listened carefully, and asked one question that made executives pause every time. "Are you here to invest in innovation or in image?" The silence that followed told her everything she needed to know. As the days passed, offers piled up. Some were flattering, others tempting. Billions on the table again. Only this time, she was the one holding the power. But deep down, Maya felt a tug at instinct that told her this wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of something else. One evening, after another long day of meetings, she walked alone through the quiet corridors of her office. The hum of the city faded behind the glass. Her mind drifted to her mother's words, echoing like a heartbeat. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't build." Maya stopped, gazing out at the skyline, its towers glinting gold beneath the setting sun. That's when it hit her. Maybe she wasn't meant to join another empire. Maybe she was meant to build one for others. The next morning, she gathered her executive team in the main conference room. The air buzzed with curiosity. "All right," said Derek, her CFO, flipping through a binder. "We've got proposals from 5 Fortune 500s. Any of them could double our valuation overnight." Maya nodded. "I've read them." "So," he pressed, "which one are we taking?" She leaned forward, her tone steady, but charged with purpose. "None of them." The room froze. "None," Derek repeated. "You're turning them all down." Maya stood and walked to the window. The city sprawled beneath her like a map of possibility. "I didn't build coal innovations to chase validation," she said. "I built it to open doors. And right now, too many brilliant people are locked out, people who don't look like the investors in those rooms." She turned to face them. "We're starting something new. A fund. A movement." Her team exchanged glances. Lena whispered, "What kind of fund?" Maya smiled. "One that invests in them. The underrepresented, the underestimated, the innovators the world ignores." A hush fell over the room. She continued, her voice gaining quiet strength. "We'll call it the Rise Fund. Our mission, to fund 1,000 minority-led startups in 10 years. No gatekeepers. No glass ceilings." Derek rubbed his temples. "That's ambitious. It's necessary." Maya replied, "If I can walk away from $3 billion, I can walk towards something bigger." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lena broke the silence with a grin. "I'm in." One by one, the rest of the team nodded. Within weeks, the Rise Fund became more than an idea, became a force. Press releases dropped. Investors called. But this time, Maya wasn't pitching herself. She was pitching a generation. Applications flooded in from across the globe, women engineers from Nigeria, coders from Detroit, inventors from Brazil. Each story carried the same thread. "No one believed in me. Until now." Soon, major outlets covered the movement. Forbes called her the architect of a new era. Bloomberg wrote, "Maya Brooks isn't chasing legacy, she's building access." But perhaps the most striking moment came at a global innovation conference 6 months later. Maya stood on stage before a packed auditorium. Cameras flashed. World leaders, CEOs, and students listened in silence. She began, "When I walked away from that deal, people said I'd made a mistake. But the truth is I made room for something better." Her voice resonated through the hall, steady and sure. Power doesn't come from sitting at their table. It comes from building your own and leaving the door open for others. The audience erupted into applause. Some stood, others cried. Even online, clips of her speech went viral within hours, captioned with one line that defined her journey. She walked away from billions and walked into purpose. Back in her hotel suite that night, Maya sat on the balcony, city lights shimmering like a constellation of second chances. Her phone buzzed. A new email notification appeared. Subject, an offer you should hear. The sender of the White House. She opened it slowly, her heartbeat quickening. "Ms. Brooks, we'd like to invite you to advise on the National Innovation and Inclusion Council. Your voice is needed." Maya leaned back in her chair, smiling softly. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman once told she didn't belong in the room was now being asked to help design it. As the night breeze brushed past, she whispered to herself, "For them, and for the ones coming next." And with that, she closed her laptop ready, not for fame, not for applause, but for the quiet, steady work of changing the world. Because Maya Brooks didn't just build a company, she built a legacy of inclusion, a movement born not from wealth, but from worth, and the offer she didn't expect. It wasn't from Tesla or IBM, it was from destiny itself. The world watched as Richard Vance, once untouchable, now sat beneath blinding studio lights, a man drowning in the consequences of his own arrogance. His voice cracked through the live broadcast. Trembling between guilt and desperation, "I made a mistake," he said, staring directly into the camera. "What I said was wrong. I disrespected someone who didn't deserve it. To Maya Williams and, to everyone I hurt, I'm truly sorry." But the words, though rehearsed and heavy, fell flat. They came too late. The empire he'd built was already a shell of what it once was. Titan Energy's logo, once a symbol of power, now flashed red on stock tickers across the world. Investors were gone. Board members had resigned. The man who used to sign billion-dollar deals was now pleading for forgiveness from a public that had already moved on. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Maya was preparing for the biggest moment of her career. The Global Future Summit held in Geneva was where the most powerful leaders, innovators, and thinkers gathered each year. And this time, for the first time, Maya Williams was the keynote speaker. The same stage where, years ago, Richard Vance had dismissed her with a smirk and a whisper, "I don't do business with people like you." Now, his name was barely on the guest list. The morning of the summit, the air in Maya's hotel suite was calm but charged. Her assistant, Jasmine, carefully adjusted the small microphone on her lapel. "You ready for this?" she asked softly. Maya smiled, looking at her reflection in the mirror, no longer the nervous entrepreneur trying to prove her worth, but a woman who had rewritten the rules. "I've been ready my whole life," she replied as she stepped into the sleek black car waiting below. Cameras flashed from every angle. The press shouted questions about the scandal, the apology, the billions, but Maya kept walking, her calm smile unbroken. She wasn't here for revenge. She was here for something far greater. Inside the summit hall, thousands waited. The lights dimmed. The announcer's voice echoed through the chamber. "Please welcome Maya Williams, founder and CEO of Rise Global." Thunderous applause filled the room. Maya took the stage, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. For a brief moment, she paused, scanning the audience. There, in the third row, sat Richard Vance. His expression was unreadable, part guilt, part Maya took a slow breath and began. "When I walked away from a deal worth $3 billion, she said, her voice steady, "people told me I was crazy. They said I'd ruined my future. But I realized something, that the price of dignity is higher than any deal." A hush fell over the crowd. Her tone carried strength, not bitterness, not revenge, but truth. "I didn't walk away from money. I walked toward a future where every person, no matter what they look like or where they come from, can sit at the table with their head held high." She glanced briefly toward Richard but didn't linger. This wasn't about him anymore. "Power isn't about how many zeros are in your bank account," Maya continued. "It's about how many doors you open for others. True leadership isn't measured by control, it's measured by compassion." The audience leaned in, spellbound. Even the live-streamed chat broadcast to millions was flooding with comments. "Go Maya. She's rewriting history. This is the speech of a generation." Maya went on, her words now flowing like a tide, lifting everyone in the room. "When I founded Rise Global, I wanted to build a company that invests not just in technology, but in humanity. A place where diversity isn't a checkbox, it's our competitive edge. Where we prove that inclusion isn't charity, it's the smartest business model there is." Her voice softened. "And if one person out there feels like they don't belong in the room, remember this. The room was never built for us, but that doesn't mean we can't build our own." Applause broke out. First a ripple, then a roar. People rose to their feet, some with tears in their eyes. Cameras captured the moment, the billionaire who once mocked her, now clapping, his face heavy with regret. Maya nodded slightly in his direction, not in forgiveness, but in closure. She took a final breath, her last words echoing through the hall. "Business should never be about ego. It should be about impact. And today, we're not just changing markets, we're changing mindsets." The audience erupted again. Flashbulbs exploded. Reporters scrambled to capture every second. It wasn't just a speech, it was history being rewritten in real time. Backstage, as the applause thundered on, Jasmine hugged her tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Maya smiled, her eyes glistening. "No," she said softly, "we did it." Outside, global headlines began to spread. Maya Williams outshines billionaire at Global Summit. From rejection to revolution, the woman who redefined business. As Maya stepped into the sunlight, the world seemed brighter, not because she had won but because she had proven that strength and grace could coexist. And as cameras followed her down the marble steps, one thought lingered. This wasn't the end of her story, it was only the beginning of something far greater. The morning sun spilled across the cracked sidewalks of Southbrook, the neighborhood where it had all begun. The place hadn't changed much. The old corner store still hummed with chatter. and the basketball court still echoed with laughter. But as Maya stepped out of her black SUV, there was something different in the air. It wasn't the neighborhood that had changed. It was her. The woman who once walked these streets, dreaming of a better life now, returned as a symbol of what was possible. Reporters had begged to follow her, to capture the moment for the world to see, but she refused. This day wasn't about cameras. It was about coming home. She walked slowly, her heels clicking softly on the pavement, eyes tracing the murals painted by local kids' scenes of hope, color, and ambition. Then she stopped in front of a red brick building that stood freshly renovated. A silver plaque gleamed near the door. The Rise Innovation Hub, founded by Maya Williams. Inside, the hum of computers filled the air. Dozens of children and young adults clustered around work tables, tinkering with circuits, coding on laptops, sketching prototypes. Their faces glowed with the same fire Maya once carried. A young girl, no older than 12, looked up from her laptop and gasped, "Waitar, you her? The lady from the videos." Maya laughed softly. "I guess that's me." The girl's eyes widened. "You built this place?" Maya nodded. "No," she said gently, kneeling beside her. "We built it. You, me, and everyone who believes that dreams don't belong to just the rich or the powerful, they belong to whoever dares to chase them." The girl smiled shyly, turning her screen so Maya could see a simple app she was designing to help her community recycle better. Maya studied it, impressed. "This is brilliant," she said. "Keep going. One day, I might be working for you." The room erupted in laughter, but behind that laughter was something deeper, a quiet, powerful inspiration, taking root. As she moved through the center, Maya paused to watch a group of boys assembling a 3D printer. One of them looked up and said, "You really think someone from here can make it big?" Maya smiled, remembering the countless nights she'd asked herself that same question. "I don't think," she said softly. "I know." Outside, construction crews worked on an adjacent lot soon to become the Williams Scholarship Academy, a school dedicated to training young innovators from underserved communities. Banners fluttered with the words, "Building the future starts here." As Maya watched the cranes lift steel beams into place, her thoughts drifted back to her mother, the woman who raised her alone, who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, who never stopped believing. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind like a gentle melody. "You didn't need their table, baby. You built your own." Maya closed her eyes, taking in the sound of laughter, the rhythm of construction, the pulse of a new generation rising. For years, she had fought to be seen in rooms that tried to shut her out. Now, she realized she didn't need those rooms at all. She had built an entire world of her own, one where others could walk through doors that never existed before. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the city skyline glowed in the distance, Maya sat on the steps outside the hub, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Kids played nearby, shouting and chasing drones that buzzed through the air. One of them, a boy with wild curls and a bright grin, ran up to her. "Miss Maya, I just built my first robot arm." She smiled. "That's amazing. What does it do?" "It waves at people," he said proudly, demonstrating as the tiny arm jerked up and down. Maya laughed. "Then it's already doing the most important job in the world, making people smile." As the boy ran off again, she leaned back, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. For the first time in years, she felt peace, not the fleeting kind that comes with success, but the deep, grounded peace that comes from purpose fulfilled. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text from Jasmine, "You're trending again. #RisTogether is everywhere." Maya smiled faintly, but didn't reply. The world could celebrate her story if it wanted, but this moment wasn't for headlines. It was for her community, for the little girl coding her dream, for the boy waving his robot's arm, for her mother, whose belief had built the foundation for all of it. As twilight deepened, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Maya whispered softly, as if speaking to the wind, "Mom, we did it." She stood, gazing down the street where her story began, the same cracked pavement, the same worn buildings, but everything looked different now. It wasn't broken anymore. It was becoming beautiful. And as she walked away from the Rise Innovation Hub, her reflection caught in the glass door. She saw not just a successful CEO, but a legacy, a woman who turned rejection into revolution, a dreamer who proved that power isn't taken, it's built. And with each step, that same quiet thought echoed once more, stronger, prouder, and everlasting. "You didn't need their table, baby. You built your own." As she moved through the center, Maya paused to watch a group of boys assembling a 3D printer. One of them looked up and said, "You really think someone from here can make it big?" Maya smiled, remembering the countless nights she'd asked herself that same question. "I don't think," she said softly. "I know." Outside, construction crews worked on an adjacent lot soon to become the Williams Scholarship Academy, a school dedicated to training young innovators from underserved communities. Banners fluttered with the words, "Building the future starts here." As Maya watched the cranes lift steel beams into place, her thoughts drifted back to her mother, the woman who raised her alone, who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, who never stopped believing. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind like a gentle melody. "You didn't need their table, baby. You built your own." Maya closed her eyes, taking in the sound of laughter, the rhythm of construction, the pulse of a new generation rising. For years, she had fought to be seen in rooms that tried to shut her out. Now, she realized she didn't need those rooms at all. She had built an entire world of her own, one where others could walk through doors that never existed before. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the city skyline glowed in the distance, Maya sat on the steps outside the hub, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Kids played nearby, shouting and chasing drones that buzzed through the air. One of them, a boy with wild curls and a bright grin, ran up to her. "Miss Maya, I just built my first robot arm." She smiled. "That's amazing. What does it do?" "It waves at people," he said proudly, demonstrating as the tiny arm jerked up and down. Maya laughed. "Then it's already doing the most important job in the world, making people smile." As the boy ran off again, she leaned back, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. For the first time in years, she felt peace, not the fleeting kind that comes with success, but the deep, grounded peace that comes from purpose fulfilled. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text from Jasmine: "You're trending again. #RisTogether is everywhere." Maya smiled faintly, but didn't reply. The world could celebrate her story if it wanted, but this moment wasn't for headlines. It was for her community, for the little girl coding her dream, for the boy waving his robot's arm, for her mother, whose belief had built the foundation for all of it. As twilight deepened, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Maya whispered softly, as if speaking to the wind, "Mom, we did it." She stood, gazing down the street where her story began, the same cracked pavement, the same worn buildings, but everything looked different now. It wasn't broken anymore. It was becoming beautiful. And as she walked away from the Rise Innovation Hub, her reflection caught in the glass door. She saw not just a successful CEO, but a legacy, a woman who turned rejection into revolution, a dreamer who proved that power isn't taken, it's built. And with each step, that same quiet thought echoed once more, stronger, prouder, and everlasting. "You didn't need their table, baby. You built your own." The camera opens on silence. A quiet morning, dew glistens on the windows of the Rise Innovation Hub. The city hums faintly in the distance, alive, awake, and forever changed. Inside, Maya stands before a group of young entrepreneurs, her reflection faintly visible in the glass wall behind her. Her hair is streaked with a few strands of silver now. Her posture is calm, collected, but there's a light in her eyes that time could never dim. She looks out at the crowd, faces full of hunger, ambition, and hope, and begins to speak. "People often ask me if I regret walking away from $3 billion. A small smile plays on her lips, and I tell them, not for a second, because that single word became worth more than all the money in the world." The audience listens, rapt. Cameras record every word, but Maya isn't speaking to the lenses. She's speaking to them, to anyone who's ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told they don't belong. As her voice continues, the scene shifts, scudding between moments of the world that her decision helped shape. A young woman in Kenya presents her startup to investors through the Rise Global Fund. A group of girls in Detroit test solar drones, powered by microchips, funded by Maya's initiative. A man in his 60s, once a factory worker, now teaches robotics to local teens in a program Maya launched. Her no had rippled outward like a wave of quiet defiance, reshaping the shores of power. Back in the auditorium, Maya continues, "When I said no that day, I didn't just walk away from a deal. I walked away from a way of thinking that success had to come with someone else's approval. That respect was something you had to earn by shrinking yourself. That's the biggest lie the world ever sold us." Her tone grows stronger, steadier. Saying no wasn't rejection. It was declaration. A declaration that dignity is not negotiable. The audience erupts into applause, but Maya simply pauses, letting the sound roll over her like wind. She's not chasing applause. She's planting seeds. The narration softens, transitioning into a montage of moments from her journey: the long nights of building, the painful stares in corporate boardrooms, the tears, the triumphs, and the moment she pushed that folder across the table and walked away from Richard Vance forever. Her voice narrates over the images. Sometimes, power doesn't roar. Sometimes, it whispers. It's in the silence after you walk away. It's in the calm that follows chaos. It's in the choice to stand alone when the world expects you to kneel. Cut to Richard Vance. Older, thinner, sitting in a quiet office that once buzzed with wealth and authority. His empire is smaller, now, his face lined with time and regret. A framed article hangs on his wall, the $3 billion walkout that changed everything. He stares at it for a moment before turning away. The look in his eyes isn't anger anymore. It's reflection, maybe even respect. He once mocked her for being not his kind. Now his kind builds pitches modeled after her principles. The camera cuts back to Maya at the hub. She's walking through the lab, greeting students and innovators. They stop her for photos, for advice, for gratitude, but she remains humble, grounded. As she passes a wall filled with quotes, her eyes fall on one newly painted in bold letters. "No" is a full sentence. She smiles faintly. Later that evening, As the sun melts into gold across the skyline, Maya steps onto the rooftop terrace of her company headquarters. Below her, the city pulses with life. The lights flicker like a constellation of possibilities. Her longtime friend and coup, Jasmine, joins her, holding 2 cups of tea. Hard to believe it's been 10 years since all of that, Jasmine says softly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Maya replies, sometimes, like another lifetime. You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd said yes? Maya takes a slow sip, then sets her cup down. Yes, she says, but then I remember. Saying no was how I built everything I actually wanted. Jasmine nods, smiling. The two stand together in silence, watching the city breathe beneath them. As the scene fades, Maya's voice carries over in narration, calm, confident, eternal. When someone says you don't belong, remember this, they're not afraid of your weakness. They're afraid of your strength. They fear what you'll build without them. Because once you know your worth, no amount of money can buy your silence again. A slow piano melody begins to play. The camera pans upward from the rooftop to the sky, to a sweeping aerial view of the city she transformed. Her voice continues. One last echo of wisdom and grace. That day, I lost $3 billion. But I gained something priceless. A legacy that says to every girl, every dreamer, every fighter, your no can change the world. The music swells. The screen fades to black. Text appears. The legacy of no. Inspired by true power, and as the final notes fade, her last whispered line lingers in the dark. They said I didn't belong at their table. So, I built my own, and left the door open for everyone else.